Welcome. Today is November 13th, 2024. My name is Stephen Payne, Director of the Bronx County Historical Society, and I'm here with a bunch of Coopniks to talk about their experience growing up in the Coops, their family history and background, and really whatever the hell they want to talk about. So here we go. We'll start off. Estelle, why don't you start off by talking a little bit about your family history and background, how your family ended up in the Coops, if you know that, but you can go back, way before then if you know that history.
Okay, I will start by making a little fuss and saying, please call me Tamar. This is because I was named Pretty Estelle, and being named Pretty Estelle was quite difficult. So I picked a new name, and it's actually a legal name. So everybody calls me Tamar, but for identification purposes, I figured there's room for Pretty Estelle. Um, I want to make a few points. First, Alan, when you were moving around, there were moments where in profile you looked just like your father.
Wow.
It was uncanny. And, I think because we were all so young, we remember all that stuff. And I thought I was sitting with your father.
Love it.
I'll take
You
that as
let
a
us-
compliment. Rather
Yes.
that than my mother.
Your father was very dignified.
Yes, yes. And Stephen, you said some guy rode a horse. I have two Russia stories. One is my uncle Shaika, who's JoEllen's grandfather. He fought in Russia in the 1905 revolution, and he got shot in the leg, and he limped his whole life. And he would always explain to us why he limped. So we learned Soviet history from Uncle Shaika's limp.
Wow.
And the other uncle was Shmilyanko. And Shmilyanko, who was the brother of Shaika's, right, an uncle of mine, he was the only one in the family who would get drunk at weddings and bar mitzvahs. Nobody else got drunk, but they had a good reason why he did. He had been drafted into the Tsar's army, and that's where he learned to drink.
Wow.
So we grew up with a lot of that history. The Coops, I think you know, were formed by the Jewish wing of the Communist Party, and I don't know who moved in first of the family, but my mother was there with my grandparents and then married my father. Now, I think at some year the Coops went broke and became a rental.
1943.
And that's when I was born, and we lived on the ground floor. So when my parents told me I had to stay in, I could go and jump out the window to the ground from the ground floor. And I did that a lot of times.
And that was in the third court, right? Is that right?
That was yes, yes. So that's how I know the beginning of the Coops. Maybe other people want to add.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
circle back to you, Tamar, and apologies about misnaming you.
You
Yeah,
didn't
that's my fault.
misname me.
That's
My
my fault.
parents did.
But listen, Estelle, tell them first about your mother, how they left Russia, how they left and went to China, as you were telling me.
Oh, so most of the family was in New York. My mother was the youngest, and the brother who was the next youngest, and my grandmother. It was 1916, and they couldn't go across Europe because of the war. They were in Belarus, okay? They couldn't go west, so they got on a train with a bunch of kosher food in a suitcase and went across Russia, across Siberia, Mongolia. They passed into Harbin, China to Yokohama, to Harbin, China to Japan, to Yokohama, and a boat to Seattle. And I knew all that, but I never found out how they got from Seattle to New York. This will never be known. But I said, weren't you scared? My mother was 12 years old. She said, no, I was with my mother. That's
Wow. Wow. So I have a lot more questions for you, Tamar.
okay.
But Ira, let's hear from you a little bit about your family history and background.
Well, so I remember, we'll start back first. Ellen, when I was 3.5, we were living in the first court. And in the first court, we lived in the building, which I'm sure you've seen, that has the hammer and sickle over
Yep.
the entranceway. So
Uh-huh.
I have a picture on my computer to show people I have good bona fides as far as my political leanings. And my father was a Polish-born immigrant here. He was an illegal immigrant. He was arrested when he was 17 in Poland and for political activity, and sentenced, put on trial and sentenced to death. And he, because where they lived was real rural, and if you were rich, you had a donkey. They didn't have a donkey, so there was no way to escape anyway. You could walk as far as you could walk. So his father said, well, we're not going to let you go back to jail in a week and get hung, so start walking. So the story, as we have it written down from my mother, who knew more, and I have it all in writing, the whole history,
Wow.
was he walked north towards the Baltic Sea. The goal was to get a ship to somewhere out of Poland. He was unsuccessful in getting a ship at the Baltic Sea, so he made what we would call a left turn going west and went into Germany, always trying to get a boat to somewhere. Failed in Germany, I'm cutting this short, walked into France, couldn't get a boat to anywhere. Was running out of real estate, kept walking west and got into Spain. In Spain, he was able to get a boat to Cuba and took the boat to Cuba. At this point, he was like 18.
What year was this about?
I'll tell you, 1923.
Wow.
And he made it to Cuba as an 18-year-old and lived in Cuba for 5 years. I never understood why my father, who's Polish, could speak pretty fluent Spanish. It just none of that ever came together, So he understood on the subway when it said no fumar, he understood what that meant.
Yeah.
Anyway, after living for 5 years in Cuba, he had 2 older sisters who had made it to the United States and had managed to amass some amount of money. And they hired a couple in Miami, Florida, to go to Cuba, and they got him a fake passport, and they took him by boat from Cuba back to Miami and put him on a Greyhound bus and said, New York is that way. And he got to New York, and there's a whole series of things, but ultimately he met my mother. And my mother was the oldest of 7 kids in Brooklyn. And when they decided to get married, he said, I have to get as far away from Brooklyn as I can. And as far away as you can get is the Bronx. And in the Bronx, there was only one place to live, and that's the Coops. So that's how we ended up in the Coops.
Wow. So just a few follow-up questions. Do you know the name of the village that in
Yes.
Poland?
Yes,
What's the name of the village?
Stashev, Staszow, Stashow.
What
Wow.
was
My
town?
brother, that's the town, Stashev. My brother and I, it's a separate side story for another day, but we went there in, I think it was 2018, because a relative of ours who is now living in Israel found somebody had died, and she paid for a gravestone for a family member. And so this was a reunion. We had 21 people come to this reunion in Poland from 7 different countries. The 21 people, it was United States, Canada, let's see, France, Malta. It escapes me at the moment. Anyway, there were 7 countries, and I have a whole great report if anybody's interested about this whole trip to Poland and what happened. Is because I usually write these things up so that it's for posterity. Maybe someday my kids and grandkids will appreciate that.
Ira, we would definitely be interested in any writing you have about your family,
Mhm.
having copies here as part of the library. It's amazing you have so much written, because that's,
It's the
unfortunately
only way to
hard to do.
preserve the future.
That's
or
right.
the past.
That's right. So do you
Stephen,
know how your parents met?
Yeah, sure do. 1 second. They and I have that all in writing too from my mother. She did a great job keeping all of this stuff organized. My mother was ice skating somewhere, and she was having trouble lacing her ice skates, and my father came over gallantly to help her lace up her ice skates and did that. And that's how they met. And they went back and forth. My father had the good cultural streak, and he had tickets to the opera and so on and so on. And he invited her out, and ultimately they got married in 1940. And I was born in 1945 after the war. My father, during World War II, was stationed in Dothan, Alabama, Dothan, Alabama, which is real redneck country. And he tells a story about how the guys were sitting around bullshitting one night, and the guy said something about they'd never met a Jew. And my father said, "I'm Jewish." And they said, "Harry, you're not Jewish. We know you a long time. You're not Jewish." He goes, "I'm Jewish." And they went up to him and brushed his hair to see where their horns were. You don't have any horns, therefore you're not Jewish.
They didn't check the tail?
They didn't check for the tail. And so we've been back to Poland, to his hometown, which is we met a really lovely lady there over the internet who took us around, my brother and I, and it was a fascinating place to grow up. I mean, she showed us the place where all of the Jews were taken in the center of town and lined up on a wall and shot.
Wow.
And there's a little Jewish cemetery there. Anyway.
Are there any Jews there today?
No.
No.
But anyway, somehow, if we have everybody's email address, I'll be happy to send out this little thing about the family, this thing that happened in Poland.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people in the Coops from Poland, for sure.
It was on the announcement.
Yeah, I can distribute it.
I want to add one thing to what Ira was talking about. He said his parents were dating. His father wanted to get as far away from Brooklyn, and they came to the Bronx.
Right.
And the only place in the Bronx was the Coops.
Right.
According to my mother, well, they picked a very rural area. I remember a farm on White Plains Road when I was growing up. But she said it was one of the few apartment developments where every room had a window. And that was a big, big deal at the time.
Absolutely.
And now it's crazy what they're building. Yeah.
I know. Dividing apartments up into as many little units as possible.
One-way ventilation.
Not in the Coops, I don't think, right, JoEllen?
No, of course not. They're
I mean,
still, it's still the Coops.
It's landmarked, but I want to put it past them to try.
I know, that's my fear. Yeah. Get rid of all the historic landmarks and start building high-rise here. They would make so much money.
Yeah, I know. So there's plenty more to ask both Tamar and Ira, but Alan, let's hear a little bit from you.
If I may interrupt for a
Oh
second.
yeah, sure. Go ahead, Ira.
I said we lived in the first court, and when I was 3.5, we moved to the last court, third court, and that's when I met Alan. Here's a fact that many people know, including Alan, that Alan and I and Raymond,
Yeah.
who's not here, went to elementary school, junior high school, and high school, and college, in fact, for the first 4 years, went to school every single day together. I mean, it was, we didn't leave until all three of us were ready to go to school, and we walked to school. If we lived across the street, across on Avenue by the project, we would get the bus. But we walked to school every day for 16 years. So.
And I'm sure I know the answer to this because it's more or less the same answer for everyone. But what elementary and junior high did you go to? And then we'll do high school.
PS 96 was the elementary school, and junior high school was 135, which was a military installation.
Yeah.
What?
Horrible.
Well, I'll
What
tell
is-
you.
Oh,
Well,
it was horrible.
What I mean was when you switch classes from one class to the next, you had to walk only on this side of the hallway, and then there were little arrows in the floor that you can turn around. And if
And
you
I thought
silent
you were saying
passing.
the building became a military.
No.
No.
It was a military installation.
The assistant principal and principal were pretty nuts.
Right. So, I don't remember her.
Now,
name.
see, I'm
Dropkin.
older, so I went to junior high school 113, and we had to take
Right.
the subway.
That's before us. That was
Yeah.
before.
Right. Because she's 2 years older than we are.
Yeah, like Marty went to 113, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so, and what high school did you all go to? I'm going to ask more about your school experiences in a second, and after we hear a little more from Alan. But just so
I
know
went to
what high school-
Columbus.
Okay, you went to Columbus, and Alan went to Columbus. Joel, and I forget, what high school did you go to?
Columbus.
Okay, all Columbus. That's what I figured. But you get the
Oh,
occasional
yeah, music and
Bronx
art.
science or music and
Right.
art next too. All right, so Alan, let's hear a little bit about your family history and background.
Well, my father was from the Ukraine, and my mother's from Moldova, which is across the river.
Mhm.
And my parents knew each other back there because they're first cousins, much to the chagrin of my son, who thinks he's a mutant. And my parents came, my mother's family got out, but my father's family didn't. And my father's parents and his eldest brothers, 2 brothers, were all killed. And he and the other brother were left. There were 3 brothers left. And there was apparently one path to come to America. And my uncle, I am told, when we go to Israel, which is every year, was my uncle apparently misspelled his name, so he couldn't use it. So my father got the pass. And my father got the pass to America. That other uncle eventually got to Israel, and the third uncle died in Russia.
Wow.
In the, I guess, maybe 60s or something like that. And so my mother, I think she came around 1921 or 22, 23. And my father 3 or 4 years later. So of course he came by himself, and they lived in Brooklyn like everybody else. And eventually they moved to the Bronx. And probably as much for ideological reasons as anything else. And they ended up in the Coops. And I was born in the Coops. My brother and sister were born in Brooklyn.
What year were you born, Alan?
46.
46,
He just made it over the line into 46.
Yeah.
I see.
By the way, I assume you know Mikkel Goldman, right?
Absolutely.
'Cause I took her to make the movie.
Yes, and fortunately, she donated all of the research that she collected for the movie to
Okay.
us, so we have it here open to the public for it's tremendous resource because she recorded a lot of interviews and collected a lot of documents and photographs and all of that.
Okay.
Now, Alan, I'm going to ask you this question, and then Ira, Tamar, JoEllen, you can weigh in too. Were your parents a part of any union, or what they do for work?
My father was one of the heads of the Millinery Workers Union.
Aha.
My mother was this, I guess, whenever she worked outside the house, she was a seamstress. So I don't know if she was part of ILGWU or not, to tell you the truth, but she only worked a little bit.
Sure.
But my dad, he did one of the few times that he ever stayed out late from the house was when he was organizing the union. He would come home and give me little ribbons, which was a big deal to me.
Wow. Were either both of your parents politically active before they came to New York, or did they become political when they were in New York? Do you know?
Well, no, they were leftists, right? They were anti-czarists, obviously.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think that, yeah, their primary orientation was anti-czarist at that time. And although I think certainly my father always harbored a Zionist feeling, but didn't do anything about it until I think it was Stalin times, when he broke with, I think, some of our neighbors and decided that it was time to give up some of that Stalinist thinking, but rather to side with Israel. My sister eventually moved to the Zionist organization to Israel.
Sure. Since you brought up kind of like, labor Zionism, did you all ever have any contact with the Farbond houses? Not too far.
Of course.
Yeah.
Bond?
Yeah, the Farbond.
It wasn't too far,
right?
It was only about 10 blocks away from us.
That's right. Yeah, I'd like to record more around that history. I just haven't found anyone who's lived in it yet. But if you know anyone, would definitely be interested in talking.
Maybe if you call my brother, who's about 8 years older than me, he might know people from there, because he also went to Hebrew school up in that neighborhood.
Oh,
so he might know somebody.
Interesting. Yeah. Because people have done a little around Shalem Aleichem. There's a lot with Amalgamated, of course, but the Farbond are, one of the four cooperatives that obviously the Coops, doing a lot around too, but the Farbond, not a whole lot of that history that's been recorded yet. So that's very interesting. Did you this is something that the rest of you all can weigh in on too, but did you participate in any of the clubs or did you go to shul at the Coops or anything like that?
Yeah. So I went to shul along with Ira and probably everybody else in the Coops. And in those days, I mean, if you didn't go to shul, there was not much else to do. So even the black kids, the black kids, the Italian kids, everybody went to shul.
I know, I've heard that.
And so we all did. And then, but I think, to my mind, one of the things that made the Coops a particularly rich place to grow up was, although without money, there was an electricity club, a physics club, a chemistry club, an art club, and you could participate in all kinds of activities. I guess it was all free, unless my mother paid a little bit of something for it.
I didn't know about
it was an amazingly rich environment culturally. And of course, there was always activities, political activities as well. I mean, I remember as a little boy not even being tall enough to reach the top of the table, but being on Allerton Avenue collecting signatures to protect the Rosenbergs,
Absolutely. And wow.
I have a traumatic Rosenberg story.
Go ahead, Tamar. Yeah.
So the Rosenbergs are in prison and everything's going on, and I have a fight with Wendy Spivak. Remember Wendy?
I haven't heard her name.
Of course. Oh my.
So I have a fight, and the fight was near her grandmother's kitchen window. In the Coops, the grandmother could see it. So I'm yelling at Wendy, and Mrs. Spivak screams out to me, "You have such a mouth on you. You could be another Roy Cohen."
Wow.
Oh.
And I went home weeping like it was the end of the world. Mrs. Spivak said I could be Roy Cohen. I remember it to this day.
Quite an insult. It's a very insult.
Back then.
Insult, yeah.
Wow. What about the rest of you, Ira and Tamar JoEllen? What clubs or did you participate in, if any, and what was your experience of the shul?
Well, I went there and then to Mittelschule, which
Uh-huh.
is on 14th Street and Fifth Avenue.
You went to Mittelschule?
I did indeed.
Oh,
But I, like everybody else, we didn't have bar mitzvahs, but we had a party where all of our relatives were invited, and I got up and gave some kind of speech, which somewhere along the line we found, but I don't know where it is now. And we were all Jewish. I thought everybody in the world was Jewish except for Richie Cucciaro
Dico.
and Eileen Campbell, who was the only black girl in the neighborhood. She lived across the street. And then, of course, there was just Beverly Cohen and Gloria Katz and you ladies.
And all our family.
And what would they teach in shul? What were some of the things, if you remember anything? I mean, I know it's hard for me to remember some things that that were taught to me at a young age, but what
it was all cultural. It wasn't religious. You know,
Sure.
it was the history, the songs, the politics. I mean, we were all learning the same left-wing stuff.
But there was also like a lot of folk tales. Remember, even Dykesel, we had one guy he went cross country and lived on an Indian reservation. He used to read us stories in Yiddish about living on an Indian reservation.
Wow.
You know,
Alan,
it was very colorful.
I sent you a picture of Dykesel a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
what's his name?
Chaver Dykesel. And everybody was called Chaver, like comrade, you know.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
But I can tell you that education, even though I was probably the worst student, and they generally hated me because I was from a Zionist family, which is peculiar for a Jewish school, but not peculiar for that Jewish school. But I ended up singing in a klezmer group when we moved to Boston.
Wow. So Alan, from your memory anyway, how many other Zionists do you remember living in the building?
Maybe two.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe very few.
Yeah, sure.
I will tell you, our family, me and JoEllen, they were all not just communists, but then Stalinists pretty much.
Yeah.
And that was fine. And then Alan's sister Ruth, who became Nevitt, took me to this Jewish club where you did lots of singing and dancing. And I became a Zionist. And with these uncles who got shot in Russia and everybody else, we'd have arguments. They would yell at me, the Zionists have no respect for Yiddish. They don't want Yiddish. The Zionists only think about the Jews, not about the rest of the world. And I was 11, 12 years old having these fights with my uncles.
Wow.
So that was a big deal. And Alan's sister had a huge influence on me. And I spent time with her in Israel, and it was very powerful.
Did from what I remember, Alan, people have mentioned your sister to me before, but did she go to a kibbutz before the state of Israel had even formed, or had it formed already?
No, she moved to Israel in 1957 for the first time.
Okay.
And she helped start 3 kibbutzim, but she went with an organization called Hashomer Tzayir. It was the Young Guardians, as they call it in English, but it's the Hashomer Tzayir in the Hebrew. It was a very well-known, very well-established leftist organization in Israel.
Sure.
So, I mean, she even shared her underwear with people, you know.
Wow.
Involuntarily.
Yes.
She lived her whole adult life in Israel, Stephen.
She lived her whole adult life.
Yeah.
Wow.
She died there. Yeah.
Wow. So can all of you still speak a good amount of Yiddish?
Okay, I want to say something about Yiddish. So I went to Yiddish school too, and we went to the dance classes. Edith Siegel.
Yep.
Edith Siegel. There were the dance classes, and then we had singing, and one of the teachers played a little concertina.
Right.
He was like a short, hunched over guy, and he played a concertina. And then we had other, oh, I know who we had. Ellie Stone
Um,
taught, but I now live in New Paltz, and there's a kind of Jewish contingent here. And I get a lot of points because I can still read and write Yiddish.
wow.
And some of them, they got words from their grandmothers. They had no idea that there was a written language, a grammar, that there were novels published in Yiddish. It's amazing. They thought it was just words. And because I learned Hebrew. So from the Hebrew, my Yiddish, and certainly my reading and writing is still there.
Tamar, I want to tell you, we're neighbors. You live in New Paltz, and I live in Woodstock.
Oh, wow.
You're
I was just
kidding.
there 2 weeks ago.
Ah,
You're kidding.
Oh,
We'll have to
wow.
get
So-
together.
absolutely.
Oh
So
my God.
Oh, and
I can answer-
Beverly. Oh, Beverly would love it.
Well,
So just to answer your question, I can still speak a bit of Yiddish. I made my way through Moldova speaking Yiddish,
Wow.
because we met every remaining Jew who lived there when we did our roots trip. Of course, they're all gone now, I suppose.
Yeah. Wow. So you did a roots trip too. That's wow. Do you have much in writing about that? Like
I do.
Ira's? Oh, I'd love to. I'd
Not
love
the
to see
same
that.
as Ira. I think Ira is a more careful, better documentarian, but I do. Yeah.
Wow. So
Wow.
Ellen, where do you live now?
I have my grandmother's apartment in the Coops.
Is that
Wow.
what we're seeing behind you?
That's where we are, yeah. And the
Wow.
paintings are floor to ceiling everywhere but the
Yeah,
bathroom.
that I could tell. I love
Foyer, and it's a big foyer. Yeah. I'd love you to see it. You're
it's
not that far.
it's V33 in the first court, right?
Yeah.
B33.
Yep.
V33. My grandmother used
Joe-
to throw water on people's head. Yes, Alan.
Do I remember that? Do I remember that you used to live what we used to call the middle court down below?
I
Yeah.
lived in all 4 courts.
Yeah,
because
Jerry
you,
Weinschenker.
but
we-
you had a little ride around car that
Yeah.
I
Oh,
coveted, and
Oh.
I maybe only 2 times that I get a chance to get such a be in your ride around car.
Oh,
And
that
ever
really-
since then, I wanted to get one. I got one finally for my grandson.
yeah, but this one was rusty and hard to pedal, but I'm so funny. I love it. I have pictures of it.
Oh wow.
See, we had a garden that people used to throw
Right.
garbage on.
Right.
I don't
My
remember a red, what was it, a red?
No, it was supposedly green and rusty.
It was
Oh.
red.
It was red. Well, maybe
Red.
I
Yeah, I
remember
remember
green.
red
Really?
too.
Red?
Wow.
It was
Ah.
a 51 Ford. Actually, I know exactly the car.
Oh,
It was
that's
like a 50 or
hilarious.
51 Ford, miniaturized.
Well, I also had a tricycle that when I
Right.
stayed with Tamar, okay, I didn't call you that.
Right.
Okay, when I stayed with Tamar, Stephen Dickerson stole. And so I always considered him a bad boy because he stole it and they found the tricycle by Twin Lakes.
Right.
where we all
Oh,
used to go ice skating.
Uh-huh. I was gonna ask you all to talk about your experience in Bronx Park, because I'm sure all of you spent a lot of time in Bronx Park.
Let me interrupt for a second.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The most salient memory I have, aside from going to school every day with Alan and Raymond, and we lived our lives in 3 places: in the Coops, in Bronx Park, and in the playground, the Parks Department playground
Mhm.
across the street. But the thing that is seared in my mind was when the FBI came and took Pop Mandel away with Alan. And we saw him, and they had Pop Mandel in handcuffs behind his back. And we said, that was 1952. Why would they do that? He's the nicest guy in the world. You only put handcuffs on criminals, people who can shoot or hurt somebody. He can't hurt anybody. What are they doing? It
You
just,
saw it happen?
Yeah,
yeah, it
me
was-
too. Yep, we were all there
Together.
watching them.
Mm,
that is seared in my memory, like, Land on the Moon.
wow. And he was probably what, in his 80s at that point?
he was old. To us,
I
he could
know.
have been he could have been 1,000. You know, we were only little
It could
kids.
have been 40 for all we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know he was up there in
Probably
his years. Wow.
60. Yeah.
It really got seared into your memory, and it makes you appreciate, like when you live in a war zone, how you never forget, you know.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
went to prison, and Larry Winston's
Right.
father went
Yep.
to
Right.
prison.
That's right. And he lost sight in both of his eyes because he had,
Right.
I think, a brain tumor that they didn't treat.
Yeah. And
Um,
Judy said hello to everybody. I saw her this weekend.
Judy Winston.
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
And she remembered everybody.
Do you all remember a lot of Coops there's a lot of Coop stories about the FBI, but do you all have more stories about the FBI since Ira brought up Pop's arrest?
I can tell you that as a little boy, me and Ira, I think Ira and me, we were able to recognize the FBI when we were 4 years old. You knew exactly the shoes they wore, the car they drove, because nobody had a new car. You know, you could tell exactly when they were in the neighborhood.
The clothes.
Right.
So one thing Alan didn't say, he was rich. Alan's father was very wealthy. He didn't say that. And I know that because he had a car. He was the only
Oh,
person in the world
yes.
that we knew that
Yes.
had a car.
My father had a car and trucks.
We didn't have a car. But about the FBI, I don't remember learning, maybe because I was a girl, what the FBI looked like. And I don't know that I ever saw anyone. But I had developed this terrible, terrible fear of these bad guys who would come and take people away. I mean, I knew the politics, but how evil they were. And for many, many years, I could not sign a petition. I was afraid to sign a petition.
Yeah. Yep.
And that stayed with me a long time.
At one point,
You
my wife and I owned a small 22-acre parcel in Jeffersonville, New York, that we, for the summer, rented out to some unknown woman who turned out to be Patty Hearst. And when I got a call from my brother one night, who lived at the time in Hartford, Connecticut, his voice was shaking and he said, "Ira, the FBI is here and they want to talk to you." So I was like, you know, what? And anyway, they put the FBI on the phone and they said, "We would like you to drive up here to Connecticut tomorrow." I said, not going to happen, because I have a business to run. My wife has a business to run, and you want to talk to me, you come to me. The FBI came to our house. I don't remember if it was the next morning or the morning after that. And they looked exactly like the FBI that we saw in 1952. They came into my house to interview us about what we were doing, harboring Patty Hearst and all of her cronies. And
And you didn't know.
when at the end of the summer, we had rented it to her for 6 weeks for $100 a week, from which we got paid cash from the Hibernia bank robbery we all came to learn. And when we went up there at the end of the summer to make sure everything was okay, it was a disaster. And our neighbors said to us, "Who was that? Who are those people that you rented your house to?" They were really weird. People would come in at night shining their lights in Morse code, and there was lots of gunfire back there. It was 22 acres, you could do stuff. Well, they were in training. And our neighbor said, and I'm just repeating this, none of us would ever say this, and one of the women there was a slanty-eyed woman. As soon as he said that, we said, "Aha, that's Wendy Yoshimura."
Wow.
Oh, my
A separate
God.
story, a separate time. If the FBI ever put together the history of Bev and I and the people that were up there, we knew everybody that was up there,
Yeah.
but we didn't know that at the
Hey,
time.
Steve, and I think I'm going to can I cut off? Because it's getting cold. I'm sitting outside, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, of
do you
course.
mind if you have more questions? Just
I
give a call.
got something for Alan to tell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Go ahead, Ira.
Alan's going to tell us. Alan's a scientist, well-known scientist, but at the age of, I'll tell you what year, about 12, we went to Bronx Park to launch rocket ships because the Russians had launched a Sputnik. And Alan had developed these copper tube rocket ships. Remember that?
Yep, of
When he
course.
nearly blew his fingers off in the park. And so he's a scientist that has all of his fingers, but he started doing these rocket ships. I remember that also like it was yesterday.
Yep, I remember it fondly. I would do it again.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I try to get my grandson into it, except his mother's too careful.
So Alan, since you have to go, I mean,
Yeah, because it's getting chilly out here.
that's right. That's right.
Boston.
So why don't you talk just a little bit about what your
Pardon me?
why don't you talk just a little bit about how your experiences in public school,
What? I didn't hear you.
your experiences in public school.
I loved school. I loved school because I didn't pay attention to anything. Nothing bothered me. My report card always said, Alan looks out the window. And I brought it home to my mother. She said, that was a good idea. So the only disappointment I had was not going to Bronx Science. But Ira can tell you what I did. I filled in the blanks A through E because I thought the computer really couldn't tell the difference between right and wrong. So, yeah, that didn't work out so good. But I ended up being with Ira all my life, so I guess I can't complain. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
But-
well, yeah. Would love to talk more with you at a
Okay.
future date, but I know it's cold outside, so you make sure and
Okay.
and get warm, and we'll follow up.
Have a good night, everybody. If you want to get together, give a call.
Could be
Bye.
great.
Terrific.
Bye-bye.
Well, can we get your contact stuff from Stephen?
Yeah.
You, his contact?
I'll send
Whatever.
an email between everyone, so so you have it. But yeah, let's talk some more about what you would do for fun around the Coops and around Bronx Park. You know, some of those memories that you have. Go ahead, Ira. I guess Ira, if you want to start first, and then Tamar, JoEllen.
Because we lived across the street from Bronx Park, as I said, we had three loci of our lives: the Coops, the park, and the playground.
Yep.
And we would go into the outside the third court. If you walk down the back steps into the park, there was a sand lot there. And at the top of that sand lot was a hill, a steep hill that we used to sled down. And there were chestnut trees, horse chestnut trees on either side of the blacktop path. And my father and mother took us there every winter. We'd go sliding down on the sled. And we had those flexible flyers, if you remember.
Mhm.
And in fact, I went out and bought a flexible flyer for my grandkids, which is in my garage.
Wow.
They're too sophisticated. They only drive around in Teslas. And but it was great just going to the park. We would walk along the Bronx River. We would go down the hill. When they were building the Bronx River Parkway, we had some pictures of me sitting on some equipment that my father took. We would go in when they were building Bronx River Parkway. It was just a great place. We thought that the world was all beautiful and wonderful like that. We didn't know that it wasn't.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you remember any like, you know, neighborhood tough guys or gangs? I mean, there were some in some neighborhoods, obviously, in the 40s, 50s, and around New York, but just curious if there were any around the Allerton neighborhood at that time.
I don't remember gangs. When we were in junior high school, there were Italians in the school.
No, we had the
Not
ROT.
where we grew up. What?
Ira must remember the ROT.
What's the ROT?
They were
What's that?
Sal Locker and all
Oh.
those guys that were,
Yeah.
What's the ROT?
it was the reign of terror.
Wait, I want to talk about Bronx Park.
Well,
Yeah,
one
go
second.
ahead.
So to me, the reign of terror was Marty Taylor and his friends.
He was
They were
yeah.
7, 8 years older than us, and they would take me, lie me on my back, and give me what's called a pink belly.
Yeah.
Just keep pounding on your belly with their hands till it was pink. So they were my reign of terror. I didn't have a reign of terror.
Yeah.
In
Well,
the coops.
In the coop.
And the Coops, yep.
I never knew.
well, I think that was a very popular sport back then.
Yeah.
Right?
Pink belly.
Yeah, pink
That
bellies.
sick ball.
It's funny. I realize I didn't think much about Bronx Park. I don't have a lot of vivid memories. But as you were speaking, Ira, it started to come back. The one thing that stood out for me was I must have been between 8 and 10 years old. And sometimes I'd have to walk along Bronx Park East at night. And I always saw the shadows of monsters and huge animals. And I would walk and I'd be very scared, but I'd be fascinated because the shadows and the trees. And I remember just being convinced that monsters lived there.
Mm. Mm.
Well, I got attacked on Bronx Park East, right outside of Dr. Ackerman's place.
How recent now?
Oh, when I was 15. Yeah.
Really?
Just recently, right?
What
Yeah,
happened?
when I was 15, it was crazy.
What
Yeah.
happened, JoEllen?
My parents were out of town and my sister was sleeping. So nobody was watching over this 15-year-old, and it was about 10 o'clock at night and nobody was out. It was cold, maybe November. And this guy was coming toward me, and the next thing I knew, he was strangling me. And and a little voice said to me, holler, scream. And he let go of me and I watched him run away.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it was traumatic. I've had some trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's terrible. Aside from that memory, do you have other memories with Bronx Park? Tamar, it took a little bit for Bronx Park memories to come back to her, but what about for you, JoEllen?
Really, I think we weren't really supposed to go to the park. And my teenage memories were of exhibitionists. So, even
Sure.
with when I had my dog, my big Irish setter, no, they weren't afraid of her. So yeah. So but yeah.
I will say, as a child, I don't think I was very much as a teenager, but as a child, the park was just a given. It was open, all playing with the sand. And I remember roller skating and bike riding along the path.
Right.
Not on Britain Street. Britain Street was my
No,
roller
in
skating.
the park.
That too.
Right?
In the park. And I learned to ride a bike in the park by Mark Tabachnikov's father.
Wow.
Right.
Irving. But it's funny because the park felt very safe, and I'd walk with like Helen Rosenfeld and Sally, and we weren't scared. There was a part that was a little bit like a cave, and I used to sometimes sit in there.
The Rock.
But there was not the same kind of crazy crime that there is now. So
yes, absolutely.
You could go anywhere you wanted, and especially if you were with another person. The only time I ever got attacked was when I was going to City College, and they told us not to walk up, I forget the name of the park, from the lower level.
Morningside Park.
Morningside Park. So we walked up there, and the first or second day we were there, a couple of black kids started chasing us. And no white kids can run that fast, but we outran them.
Yeah.
I got a question, if I can. Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Talking about the Shula used to have an annual bazaar where people would.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
So my father was like the guy who organized all of the stuff, and he was like this great salesman. probably browbeat women into spending 25 cents for something. But he organized that bazaar every year. And that's what I remember.
You remember the dinners? The
No.
big dinners on the holidays, and they would have these, oh, they were wonderful dinners that some of the women would make, and it was
In the
great.
Coops?
In the where we danced with Edith Siegel down in there,
Yeah.
down in the auditorium.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, they
What
had
what
you
what
don't
holidays
remember that
would they be for, JoEllen? Do you
for
remember?
for the Jewish holidays?
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably Alan would remember, maybe Beverly, but
You,
they were wonderful. I was
you
very
know,
impressed with the cooking.
when,
Yeah.
when you when you talk about the communists, my mother remembers that on Yom Kippur, everybody would be eating ham sandwiches.
Rebels. I love
Well,
rebels.
I was gonna ask to what extent any of your families kept kosher, because I've definitely heard stories of people who might have been communist politically, but just out of the sake of tradition, they still kept kosher in their house. So curious about your families.
I never knew a kosher person till I was in high school.
Okay, I'll tell you my kosher story. My mother was staying with my grandmother, who totally helped her. She did everything for her. Only my mother had to walk my sister. She was 9 months old. Walk my sister and feed her. And my father came to visit. He was in the Merchant Marines, and he came to visit. And my grandmother was kosher, living in Brooklyn, and my mother served my father bacon. And that's when we moved to the Coops, because grandma said, okay, Jane, it's time to get your own place. And that's my kosher story.
Oh,
My mother told me that story.
Ira and Tamar, what about your families? Well, Tamar, you answered you didn't know anyone who
kosher?
kept kosher.
Well, my when I was a baby, we lived with my grandmother, and she was kosher. And apparently, I was a skinny kid, and the doctor said if I didn't fatten up, I could die. And I had to eat bacon. So my mother tells the story she would wrap the bacon in endless kind of wrapping paper and sort of sneak it to me.
But my father said she had a fantastic nose.
Ooh.
Your grandmother. That's what my
really?
father said. Yes. Yes, that's what my father said.
And I never knew a prayer. I never heard a prayer till I was out of college.
Uh-huh.
There was
Yeah.
no religion at all,
Right.
right?
Zero.
Right, nothing,
Zero.
nothing. Except we were told you were Jewish. That's as far
There
as it
was the
went.
culture. There
Yeah.
was the culture, but
Right. But nothing.
prayers.
Mm-mm. Shul? Mm-mm. Never.
Yeah.
No holidays, nothing.
My mother, as I mentioned, my mother was the oldest of 7 kids. And in a different era, she would have been a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. And she did like the income taxes for Alan's parents and for other people in the Coops. She had her act together. And she actually ended up graduating. Took her 100 years, but she ended up graduating from college. She went to Jewish Theological Seminary.
Wow.
And Baruch. And but anyway, so since she was the oldest of 7 kids during the Depression and had secretarial skills, they sent her out of the house to get a job working in some office environment. And her mother, my grandmother, was a great cook and made the best blintzes in the world. And my mother promised to learn how to make blintzes like grandma did when my younger brother Elliot finally went to school. Clearly, he's gone to school. She's never learned. So she was the world's worst cook, and my darling wife of 57 years will tell you how she made food. Just terrible, just terrible. So we weren't kosher. Didn't know what it meant.
Did you all go to many of the stores on Allerton Avenue? Do you have very many memories of the stores on Allerton?
We do indeed.
Yeah, let's hear about those. I've heard a lot of pretty interesting stories about the appetizing store and the multiple jars of of pickled things that eventually had to, or multiple barrels of pickled things that eventually had to be maybe stored in other containers. But
I remember the appetizing store near the subway station.
Right.
And the one around the corner, the little one around
Moishes.
the
There was
corner.
Moishes.
Yeah, there were both. There was a
And
big
then
one
there
and a
was-
little one.
There were two.
Yeah, right around the corner, there was another little one. They had the barrels outside, a small one, like 2 stores in.
You must be
Yeah.
a lot older than me because I don't remember that at
I'm
all.
younger than you.
Mark said she when she was born.
And there was Murray's, the candy store, Murray's.
Well, that's where we always went. We would
Egg
go
creams.
for an egg cream.
What was, who was Murray Hecht? Who was his son you were friendly with?
Stephen.
Stephen.
And then he had a sister, Linda. Linda
Right.
Hecht. Actually, she's on Facebook. And Marvin, the little one was Marvin.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. They lived in the next building in the second court.
I remember egg creams very
Egg
well.
creams, definitely egg creams. And my
I
father
still make
taught us how to
myself
make.
egg creams.
Yeah, my father taught us how to make egg creams. We were
Oh,
good at
I
it.
make egg creams. I love them.
and you'd get those from the candy shop, right?
Yeah.
No, you take milk, seltzer, and chocolate syrup.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the candy store, yeah, too.
Huh?
In Murray's, you'd get an egg cream.
No, but they had the seltzer,
Yeah, the seltzer bottles.
the bottles. I just use whatever,
Bottles.
It's not as good. It's not as good. But seltzer, a little milk, and chocolate syrup.
Seltzer that they delivered. And the
Right.
soda, the seltzer and soda man.
Yeah.
But we never had it delivered.
Oh, we did.
We didn't either. It was something you only got in the store.
Oh, no, we got it. My father, he had to teach us how to do that. That was
And
one of our
Sapersteins?
lessons.
Not just
Yeah.
the bakery.
You know, that
Everybody.
they say every subway stop had a fresh bakery.
Oh
Helen
boy.
Parkway did.
Uh-huh.
God, they had good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Well,
went
what-
to Saperstein's a lot. My father loved Saperstein's.
Yeah, we got nice warm bread that you eat on the way home. Sure.
Wow. And what about the grocery store? Was it the A&P at that point that you went to around the corner?
No, the A&P was all the way up by White Castle.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's right.
No, we had Fedco underneath.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And
okay, yeah.
Safeway? Did we have Safeway?
Well, they
Memory.
start changing names. They're
Yeah.
still there, actually.
But,
That
yeah, remember-
supermarket's there.
Fedco underneath the L.
Yeah.
So this is a cute little story. So my mother would take us to the supermarket. There was nowhere else to leave us. There was no such thing as a babysitter. And she was shopping with another woman and her daughter. And my mother talks a lot. And they looked around and I'm gone. And the woman's daughter is gone.
Oh.
We're just gone. So they start running through the store, but we're gone. So they run out onto to White Plains Road. We're gone. And somebody had the bright idea that we used to like stairs. So they ran up the subway stairs, told the token booth, I'm looking for my kids. And she went underneath the turnstile, ran up to the platform. And there is myself and I forget the girl's name. I knew it. We were going to get married. We ran away. We were on the subway, holding hands, waiting for the train to come in. Can you imagine if the train came in and we got on a train? We'd still be riding around there.
Wow. Wow.
We
we're-
talked about all this fun stuff, but mixed in with it was a serious commitment to school and education and homework and hours a day, and nobody thought anything of it. That was really the core of our weeks, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Not me, not my family.
Not you and not Alan.
We did not. We didn't do homework. We're terrible students. I didn't learn to be a student till I was in high school when they told me I could quit if I wanted to. Then all of a sudden, it was easy.
So
But-
But a lot of us, and
I had no discipline. You know, my parents were out of town a lot, and
yeah.
yeah, especially as a teenager, it
But
was
I think the
crazy.
number of kids who went to college and to the city colleges,
Oh
because nobody
yeah.
had money,
Oh,
was a
everybody
very
was
high
brilliant.
percentage of the Coops.
look, we were the luckiest people in the world that we had parents that said you have to get an education.
Yeah.
And that
Mhm.
was city college. How many of us could have gone to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Dartmouth or whatever? City college was free, Hunter College was free, Queens College was free, and that's how we all managed to move forward in life. At least
Absolutely.
Mhm. And
self.
you wonder how they're going to, what they're going to do with a bunch of ignorant people in this world. But we shouldn't get too serious, should we?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, that is a problem. I mean, when
Yeah.
people ask people
Ignorance.
if they know how much they paid for 4 years of college plus my 5th year of graduate school, they can't. I say I paid zero. They go, "What do you mean you paid zero?"
Yep.
It's an
Right,
inconceivable idea.
right,
And, you know,
right.
not everybody has to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, or whatever.
No, I'm so grateful my daughter was able to still get that. You know, it was amazing what's happening. I'm freaked out. Don't mind me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, since you all have been talking about school right now, why don't you talk some more about what you remember about the teachers, you know, at the elementary, junior high, Columbus High School? What were the teachers like? Did any of them take an interest in you? Were any of them a pain in the ass? Just memories about the teachers at the schools.
My,
Well, I'll
fa-
say, yeah, go ahead, you talk.
my fantasy, I could be wrong, is that we were hardworking kids. We did all our homework, and it pushed the teachers to have to keep working. You know, you couldn't do nothing. The teachers had to supply material.
Look, I remember almost all of my elementary school teachers. My first grade, the first grade teacher was Miss Miller. I don't remember my second grade, but my third grade teacher was Miss Schnur, Schnur. My fourth grade teacher was Miss Wells, which is one of my passwords because I can remember that. And we had her also in the fifth grade. And everybody loved her. She was a fabulous teacher. She came in on Ash Wednesday with ashes on her forehead, and all of us told her she had dirt on her forehead. So that had to start a whole conversation about Wednesday. And then in the sixth grade, we were going to get Miss Hoffman. And that was the first time I signed the petition. I don't remember who wrote the petition. My wife is calling me. I'll send her a voicemail. Calling from a different part of the house.
I remember my teachers.
They were
Uh,
great.
Wait, what was the petition about, Ira? Do you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The petition was that we had Miss Wells in fourth grade and fifth grade, and we thought that she was fabulous, and we won her in the sixth grade.
Oh, okay.
We
I
did the
see.
petition into the principal, who was Mr. Lifshitz,
Yep.
and he came and talked to us and said, "We appreciate the fact that you all love Miss Wells, but you have to get a different experience and learn about somebody else's way of teaching."
Yeah, well, Miss Wells was the music teacher, and Miss Hoffman was the music teachers. So we
Miss
were all
Hoffman.
in the music classes.
Right.
Ah.
Yeah, and Miss Israel
Can you imagine poor Mr. Lipschitz? He's running an elementary school
with that
where
name.
the kids make petitions. Poor Mr. Lipschitz.
Insane, right?
Wow. As far as the elementary and junior high, what was the student body like? Was it primarily Jewish students who were there?
In
Well,
elementary.
Elementary school.
There were black students from the Coops,
Uh-huh.
and then there were Italian students, and I remember thinking anybody whose name ended in a surname in an O or an A was very exotic.
Uh-huh.
That was the Italian.
Who are the other Italians?
Huh? I didn't know they didn't come from the Coops. They were up
Oh, well, we had Richard Cucciaro.
Kruger Avenue is where
Kruger
the
Avenue.
Italians started.
Right.
And then a few on Britain Street. They were on Britain.
I think Joel, and I think your microphone might be occasionally doing something.
Is it on now?
Oh yeah,
No?
yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay. But yeah, Britain Street, there were also Italians in that
I see.
little apartment.
Did I know in an earlier generation the answer to this question is yes, but did any of you have any kind of with Italians in the kind of wider neighborhood or anything like that?
Any problem, you said?
Yeah.
Problems?
No.
No.
The generation before you, sometimes groups of Italian children, teenagers would chase them back to the Coops.
Yeah,
So-
that was like Reggie's time. They had a
That's right.
problem. Yeah, they had a problem with the in the club where they came and busted up the place, busted up a piano they had.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remember them breaking into the library back there, that ROT thing that I was talking about, and busting up the library a bit. And they
Wow.
had a club. You don't remember, Ira, that they had a club? It would have been 58, I guess, in 1958. They had a club down in the cellar between the courts, between the second and third court, like right under the little roof.
And
Yeah.
Marty Taylor was part of it?
No.
No.
Bobby Lawler was part of it.
Bobby Lawler.
Bobby Lawler.
Bobby Lawler. I've heard his name
Bobby
before.
Lawler was part of it because at some point they wanted to throw him out because he lived in the same building as Beth. And he was always having the ROT over to the apartment.
So that's how they got a club, because I was wondering, I didn't know any of them.
I thought it was Sal, because Sal was he was a wheeler dealer, manipulator.
But Bobby
And
Lawler, okay.
Bobby Lawler.
When we lived in the third court, we lived in, you went in through the tunnel, you know. It was an
You
apartment
lived
building.
with Sheila Schneiderman. Were you in the same section as Sheila Schneiderman?
Name is not familiar.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, we lived when you walk through the tunnel before you got to the open courtyard, Alan lived on the right-hand side on the first floor. So I could actually go down at night and knock on his window and tell him to come on out. Let's go for a walk. And I lived on the left side, next to the top floor. And above us lived, I forget his name, a black guy who wrote Banana Boat songs.
Yeah, Al Wood.
Al Wood. And I got into trouble or disagreements with Al Wood because he allowed his son to roller skate. You know, in those days there was metal wheel roller skates, and they roller skated around the apartment, made us nuts. To a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
But yeah, Al Wood, that was his name.
Right, and then they moved to the second court.
Right.
I think his son might have been named Al too. I forget.
And Marty's his daughter-in-law, his sister-in-law.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Marty Zucrow, Tamar.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And what was the name of Marty's older sister who married him?
Peppy. Yeah.
That's right.
But I heard that
That's
both Peppy's daughter, her daughter and her son died
Yeah.
very
Ooh.
young. Peppy's, and she's got, what does she have? Not Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. In
Is she
California.
here? Or
In
Marty's
California.
In California.
And so is Peppy. Peppy lives with, I think, another daughter. I don't know where she had another daughter, somewhere. Maybe Al. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
Robin used to play with Eileen, with my niece.
I got
So,
question.
oh, go ahead, Ira. Yeah.
So curious. So all of us went to public school,
Uh-huh.
and maybe the city college or one of the what's now city university colleges. Did any of your children go to Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Princeton, any of that
No
kind
children.
No, my daughter went
Yours?
to Lehman.
of Lehman?
Lehman.
And yours, Ira?
My son, my son went to Dartmouth because he had a summer job, and the boss there was a big benefactor of Dartmouth. And so my son is extraordinarily bright, much brighter than I am by a millionfold. He became very wealthy in his own right. He's 47, 48 now, and he's a philanthropist, which is nice to be in
Wow.
position. But he the boss he worked for went to Dartmouth, and when you're in high school, he applied to Harvard and not Princeton, somewhere anyway. So he got an interview with somebody in Dartmouth, high up on the administration or admissions department, the head of admissions. So we drove up there, and it's supposed to be a 20-minute interview. And my wife, Bev, and I are waiting outside for an hour and a half, and what's going on here? And he finally comes out. I said, so he goes, I'm going to Dartmouth. So I said, we don't necessarily have the money to afford Dartmouth, but which is a separate side story. We bought some shares of some company that my brother's brother-in-law knew was an inside deal, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the stock went way up, then went way down. It was worthless. But Craig, my son, said, can I have some of that stock? So we gave him 700 shares of it or something like that, or 1,000 shares. And it was worth $2. But my wife taught him how to read the stock market pages in the New York Times. And he came to us one day and said, you have to look at this, Mom and Dad. The stock is going up. And so we watched it go up, go up, go up, go up. And we start calling around, how come the stock is going up? And we didn't know anything about stock, but we couldn't sell it because it was restricted shares and you had to get signatures of people, some of whom were in China, some of whom were in Europe. We had no idea. We FedEx stuff around the world and we got all these signatures. And all of a sudden, that stock that we bought for however many thousands of dollars was now worth like $35,000. And we sold, I said, we should sell it. So we sold half of it 2 days before New Year's. And I said, I'm not going to wait. And 2 days after New Year's, we sold the rest of it. And we had enough money to send him to Dartmouth.
Wow.
And so the stock market for this communist kid was great.
Wow.
It's like a gift. It was meant to be.
Yes.
He's
Oh, it looks like
Alan Taylor again.
maybe Alan
Good.
is
I guess he
back,
drove home. Maybe he's.
He figured, people from the Coops, we can talk.
There he is.
Oh
We can
yeah, yeah. You
talk.
knew we'd still be here, Alan, didn't you?
Yeah, we can talk.
Yay!
That's what I figured.
Hey.
But before you guys all start talking, I just wanted to say something. And that is, first of all, I'm sorry for interrupting. And second of all, that if I owe whatever I succeeded in my life in doing, half of it goes to Ira. Really, he was the guy, when you asked me if I liked school because I didn't do anything. I just hung out. But Ira was the one and his mother were the one who put me on some kind of straight and narrow.
Really?
Yeah,
That's true.
it's funny
To this day, I still don't know how I got into college. I really don't. I don't remember filling out any forms. I think Ira's mother must have filled them out for all of us. So I wanted to get that in before you hung up.
That's
Love
great.
it.
Yeah, it's funny because Ira and Tamar were just talking about how studious they were, and JoEllen would say, "Not me."
No.
The thing about the studiousness was my mother didn't. We would come home from elementary school, and my mother said, "You sit down and do your homework."
Uh-huh.
Third grade, and then you can go out and play ball. But so when I can go out and play ball, the games were already in progress. The sides were chosen up, and I was like, hanging around waiting for somebody to say, "Ari, you want to join?" Which never happened. So finally, in the third grade, somewhere in the third or fourth grade, I said, "Ma, I am not staying home and doing homework. I am going out to play ball now." And that was a revolution. That was my first revolution.
In third grade, making that revolution, making the petition, just a couple years
Well,
later.
I remember in the seventh grade, I was in the SP, the Rapid Advance.
Yes, we all were.
Uh-huh.
And what happened? We had to write a paper on something. We'd never written a paper before. So a few of us girls went down to the 42nd Street Library to research these subjects. And they said to us there that we were too young to do to use the adult library, and we'd have to get permission from our teachers. We have to get letters. So we went back to junior high school 113, and we were hysterical. We need letters, because we can't do our homework if we don't get these letters. And we were schlepping back and forth from the Bronx to 42nd Street, and we got the letters.
Wow.
Very
That's
good.
how we did our little papers.
Wow. So do any of you remember, I mean, did you just kind of pick up this way of you know, I mean, clearly there's some of your parents' political activism in the background. Did you just kind of pick it up through osmosis, or did your parents ever sit down and say, you know, if you want something, here's ways to go about it?
No.
Oh, I think you were taught by behavior
Yeah.
that if you want to get something done, do it.
Yeah,
You know, it's up to you to do it.
for sure.
In fact, I had an issue like that this very day.
Wow. Did any of your parents ever talk much with you about their, you know, politics? I mean, obviously growing up in the era you did, there's some
Yeah,
concern
all
I'm
the
sure they had.
time.
Yeah.
And in Shula, we sang all these songs about the Soviet Union and the
Yeah.
new Jewish homeland. It was just part of everyday life for
So
me.
the Red Scare didn't really have too much of a
It
chilling effect
terrified
on
us.
people. Uh-huh.
Oh, no, we were terrified because we were being investigated.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It was the way of life. It wasn't a part of just a minor part of life. It was
Sure.
our life.
Sure.
That's right.
We were taught it was appropriate to be activists. And our dad, my father, every night would come home and read us the letters that came from his remaining family in Europe, or talk politics at the dinner table. I mean, that's what you talked about. You didn't talk about the Red Sox, you know.
Talk about the
That's right.
Holocaust. My father made me sit down. I think I was 7 years old or 8 years old, and told me all about it.
Wow.
What I remember is all of our parents were here long before World War II.
Right.
And I remember we had some refugees in the neighborhood, and they had the numbers on their arms.
Right.
But we
Zimmerman's
were sort
candy
of
store.
pre-Holocaust, right? Is that right? That kind. It was different than kids whose families really, where everyone was killed.
We had my father's side, his brother. My father was here before World War II. His brother and wife, second for each of them, met in Auschwitz, and they survived. And it's a separate story, but they agreed to get married. And I remember when they came to the U.S., I went down to Penn Station to meet them coming off a train. I didn't know where they came from. I mean, I was 6 years old or something. And they came off a train, and the first thing my first cousin, who now lives in, of all places, Dallas, Texas, wanted was chocolate. And that's David Allen.
Yeah, I know.
Cousin David, who anyway.
Dr. Joller was a survivor.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
We're very close friends with Dr. Jollick's daughter still.
Goldie, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Trudy.
Was
Trudy.
he in the Coops?
Oh,
Was that family in
yeah.
the Coops? Yeah.
He had
Report.
the corner. Okay, there was 2 entrances to his place. So all the way on the corner, if you come to visit me again, I'll show you. It's not there anymore. They closed it, but there was an entrance right on the corner of Barker, right by Arno. And then
Right.
inside it was the central little building. So it was big.
So,
That's where they lived.
Your microphone is
Oh yeah, well that's because
something.
it's this, my
Uh-huh.
old baby. Yeah, but yeah. But they had a big apartment. That's where they lived
Right.
and worked.
Yeah, they lived in the apartment. Right.
Yeah,
And there was a dentist on Bronx Park East.
Ackerman. Your brother he used to torture him. You don't remember the dentist torturing Ira?
I never went to Ackerman. There was also
Oh,
Stemler,
There
Dr.
was Stemler.
Stemler.
Yeah, there was
And
the guy who
Stemler would
spoke.
not give me an injection because he had to know when it hurt.
Oh, what an idiot. He must have been the one that pulled my tooth when I was staying with you
That was
without
a
anything.
nightmare.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dentists weren't very pleasant ever.
Alan, while you were away, just ask you a couple questions that came up. First one is if you have very many memories of stores along Allerton Avenue, what you remember about them.
Yeah, of course. Where there was the what was that? The bakery, the Commission Bakery,
Sapacines.
Dapperstein's, the appetizing store. Remember the
Yeah.
guy with the Maisha, the guy in the appetizer, he would go like this. What's that?
Ugh.
He'd like wipe his nose in the same move, like pick out a
Ugh.
heading or something like
I
that.
don't remember that thing. Al's Camera Shop.
Yes,
Which I worked there.
That
Yeah,
was
I
a
worked
great
in Al's
store.
Camera
I
Shop.
wish we had stores like
Right.
that today.
Yeah, then there was the that restaurant. Remember the restaurant used to
Ralph's.
used to take a ticket when you went into the store, into the restaurant. It was just beyond where remember Al's Camera Shop used to be up out in there. Then it became, then it was close
Right.
to my
It was
place there.
tiny up there, like up there. Yeah, by Kruger or
And
something.
there was that
there was
restaurant. that
the
used to go in.
delicatessen by the subway.
Yeah, with Esther. Esther's
Right.
father was there.
That's right.
Right.
Beautiful
I remember,
Esther.
remember the first time I saw a black person eating knish, I thought, wow, this is so weird. I said,
We're in the neighborhood. Obviously, when Parkside were built, a lot of new and different kinds of people came to the neighborhood. But were the only black black folks in the neighborhood from the Coops? Were there any in any other part of the Allerton neighborhood that you remember?
In the projects.
Yeah, in the projects. Yeah.
There's Eileen Campbell, who I was temporarily in love with.
My cousin Arthur too, I think.
It was attractive.
I've heard her
Actually,
name.
and Karen, you remember Arnold Molina? Karen Molina's brother,
Yeah.
Arnold Molina? Yeah, well, he was also with her for a bit. He came to the Coops thing, to the show, Arnold.
Oh,
That's right. He
And
did, yeah.
Karen and
Yep.
Eileen Campbell, but I didn't see her.
Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
was there for the opening. I don't know where we were. We must have been
I didn't see
outside.
Eileen either.
We must have been sitting outside at the time.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, that's too bad.
all I remember about Eileen is she was tough. Didn't she try to beat us up a couple of times, Ira? I think I
No,
remember
she wouldn't.
being tough.
Don't remember.
She was friends with Beverly, I know. They were good friends. And Arthur.
Well, what are Beverly Cohen and Gloria Katz doing these days?
I think Gloria's husband has been very sick, and Beverly lives in Jersey, and she would love to see you, both of you, Alan, Ira. I mean, she really was so happy to hear that she was going to, but she's dealing with stuff that she couldn't. Yeah. But I hope you get in touch with her.
Talking about those two young, I guess we can call them girls at the time. Does anybody remember Carol Caprino?
Of course, Carol died.
Wow.
I'm going to give you all bad news. Okay. Yeah.
Carol.
She was a friend of Beverly's.
Right.
She lived in the projects.
Right.
On this side of the projects, not on Arno, but over where the Gersteins lived, in that building.
By the way, if you want more information, you should speak to somebody like my brother, who's older than me. He knew the Coops much better in the heyday.
I'd love to. I definitely will follow up with you on that, Alan.
And my cousin Danny too, even though they didn't live there, they were connected with, Estelle. Same.
Sure.
Didn't you have a cousin Arthur? Wasn't Arthur your cousin too?
Arthur was going to join us, but he didn't. He was, I guess he had to work. He's over in Washington State. But he wanted to join it when I said who was going to be here. It seemed like such a great thing if we could all get together.
Yeah.
What kind of work does he do?
Stephen.
Arthur?
Yeah.
Okay. Arthur is a psychologist in the Washington prison system.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think what I'm told is he has to make decisions on who's released. Oy.
Wow.
Yeah. That gets annoying.
Just as an aside, real quick, so you all know who all that have recorded with already. Let me see if I can run down the list. JoEllen had, spoke with her a few years back for the first time, so definitely have known JoEllen now for a while. Charlotte Dickerson, who's in Massachusetts. I don't know if that name rings a bell.
Yes.
Stevie Dickerson's sister. That must
That's
be
right.
Yeah.
Stevie-
Stephen Dickerson's, yeah.
Where does she live in Massachusetts?
She lives in Western Mass. I forget the town off the top of my head, but in Western Mass. And
Stephen died, I heard.
he did.
Yes.
I liked
did.
Stephen a lot.
Stephen and
Yeah.
Lori died.
Yep.
Lori died too?
And actually all of them. And the
Melissa
younger two
too.
sisters, Melissa and Sharon, both. The
Yep.
whole family.
Yep. I recorded with Melissa before she died, fortunately, but yeah, it was pretty sudden for her.
Very sudden.
I'm doing this randomly off, the top of my head, but a group of folks, definitely from the older generation, Charles Turner, let's see, Thomas Warner. Some of these names might not ring a bell because they might have been moved out by the time you all, were old enough to
Allison
have movies.
McKenzie.
Alice McKenzie, of
Right.
course, Pete Rosenblum, who just recently passed. I haven't recorded yet with Mo Resner, but he's donated. I don't know if you all knew this or not, but he took a lot of videos. I don't. He somehow got a hold of a video camera back in the day, but videos around Allerton from the 40s and 50s.
Wow.
So I'm going to make those available on our online repository at some point soon. But it's all around the Allerton neighborhood, Bronx Park. Hours of videos that he took.
Wow.
Let's see who else there is. Of course, Judy Winston. I think JoEllen mentioned her earlier.
Nina.
Let's see. Oh, Sonia Goldstein. She just lived she didn't grow up in the Coops. She lived in the Coops with her husband for a handful of years, but has very vivid memories from the period, like early 50s.
JoEllen, Sally, and Nancy Ehrlich.
Mm-hmm.
You should talk to them.
That name rings a bell.
Well,
Yeah.
Sally's actually a famous artist.
Ah, okay.
And Nancy, I'm friends with her on Facebook. I know. There's a lot of people.
I know there's a lot of
There's
people.
a lot of people.
There's more too, but just to give you a
Ira,
sense.
what about Eugene Ornstein? Should tell him to be.
Oh, I remember that name so well.
And he had two older brothers who would be pretty good resources.
I saw Eugene Ornstein this is decades ago, when I went to Canada. He was the head of the Jewish Studies Department at McGill University.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's at least a few Coopniks in Montreal. Paul Jurgens. I don't know if that name rings a bell,
Yeah.
but he's in Montreal. I think he's been there ever since 1968 when he got a little card in the mail and decided to go to Montreal instead.
And
JoEllen,
Somebody's fiddling with the microphone.
I got it.
Eugene was at McGill for a long time.
Very, very long time.
He
And
might
I
still
went
be
to visit him, and we had a great day, but he was living, I want to say, a very Spartan life. And I don't know if it was as a result of not getting paid well as a teacher or whatever, but I mean, he didn't even have books like I have back there in his house.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, it was so Spartan, as though he just got out of prison. It's just that's my recollection, but he was a good kid.
I'll have to see if I can get in touch with him if he's.
But he had two elder brothers too, so they would be good resources too. They
Yeah.
were quite a bit older than he.
Oh wow. Peter Bryson too. I've spoken with. I don't know if that name rings a bell.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a few more that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but it's about almost like 24 or so. Norris, of course, Norris Burroughs, who's very interesting. I think he still lives in the UK.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so anyway, but feel free to send me names of anyone else that you can think of. I have, as long as you all still have the energy, I have, so a couple more questions, and then maybe we can call it wraps for today. And if
Go
you
for it.
okay, yeah. So this is just a small question. You all were mentioning different things that might take place in the auditorium. Do you remember any musicians performing in the auditorium? Because I have some stories that I'll share with you all if they might have stopped by that point, but any musical performances in the auditorium?
I do. I think the Penny Whistlers used to perform there. The Penny Whistlers was a folk group from the 50s, I guess, maybe 60s. And my sister's wedding happened in the auditorium.
And Beth
Oh,
had,
Really?
my sister had a party in the auditorium for the wedding too.
wow.
Interesting,
And
yeah.
and my husband and I are friends with one of the penny whistlers,
Really?
Bobby London.
Hmm.
Wow. Um, yeah,
He's
I've heard a story. This might have been in the 30s, but I've heard that Woody Guthrie performed in the auditorium
Could
at
be.
one point, which makes sense. I mean,
It makes perfect
flew
sense.
in the same circles, and Leadbelly again makes sense.
really?
And Pete Seeger. I know Pete Seeger for sure, though. I haven't confirmed, I haven't confirmed with any documents Woody Guthrie or Leadbelly, but Pete Seeger, I have a letter from him that was written to Brenda Beatty. Oh, she's another person, Brenda Beatty
Wow.
Newton,
Yeah, that I've heard
um,
of that name.
where he remembers performing in the auditorium. I don't know what year it would have been, but apparently Pete Seeger performed in the auditorium too. Uh,
But you must have read the book Outwitting History, right? Outwitting
yeah,
History,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
description of the Coop Library in there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Absolutely. So, I mean, you can't even go into the auditorium now. Right,
No,
Joellen?
No.
It's
no,
That
it's
library,
they have equipment there,
yep.
you know.
that library ultimately went to the Yiddish Book
Yeah,
Center in
right.
Amherst.
That's what the
That
book
was
is
an
about.
important Yiddish library.
Well,
Yep.
supposedly Beverly had heard that they were destroying it, and she had a lot to do with it too, of getting the
Really?
stuff there, that they were coming to pick it up and throw things out.
And
The
They
Yiddish
came
Book
and
Center
took
in
it.
Amherst is
Yeah.
fabulous.
that's right. It is. It is. We've done a couple joint programs with them over the last few years because so much of their holdings, has to do with the Bronx, um,
Mhm.
naturally. But it's interesting because a few items I think over the years must have made their way out of the library because in our collection, I just got it for like $5 on eBay. It's nothing really that special, but it's I think a 1936 Communist Party like election platform, but it's book stamped. The Workers Cooperative Library, 2700 Bronx Park East.
Oh
It's
my.
falling apart now.
Well, they had their own printing press.
Yep, 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 yep. Um, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately now, I mean, a lot of the outside building still looks really, um, you know, for the most part, pretty good. The garden is amazing and all, but a lot of the amenities that were specifically designed to benefit, the working people who lived in the building, they're all closed off,
The
closed off now, shut down.
gardens. They had beautiful
Well,
gardens.
the gardens are being taken care of by the residents, not by
That's
the,
right.
Okay.
If you picked a leaf off the hedge,
Yeah.
somebody would be looking out the window and yelling at you to not destroy the plant. I mean, pick the
That's
leaf
right.
off.
You never walked through the gardens to get from one place to another. You always stayed on the path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, and the second court had beautiful connections throughout, and they had rose bushes. Do you remember? They
Yeah,
had
pergola.
the wooden like
Trellises.
trellises and rose
Trellises.
bushes right outside of where we lived.
Right.
I have a picture somewhere of me standing under the rose bush. Yeah, an old black and white one. Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
It was so
Wow.
it was beautiful.
Wow. So I think, a question to end on maybe for today, unless you all want to add other questions afterwards, is this is maybe a hard question to answer, but uh let's take turns on this. Maybe I'm just going to order my screen. Ira, Tamar, JoEllen, Alan. How would you say the Coops shaped your life, after you moved out? Well, JoEllen still lives there, but how would you say the Coop shaped your life?
Well,
I mean, I think it. Go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead,
Ira.
Ira.
I'm just going to scream before you. That's all.
Go ahead.
I think that the whole thing shaped the whole experience shaped our lives in terms of who we are, what we did, our politics, how we treat people, how we expect to be treated. I mean, it was just all encompassing. There's no, I don't think you can pick any specific thing unless you were an outsider. You were born there. You absorbed all of the politics, and there's probably none of us here that would have voted for Trump. So
Thank goodness.
thank goodness. We have people who are despondent, up here in Woodstock. Of course, Woodstock's very hippie,
Uh-huh.
which is one of the. I'm going to tell you a quick story about Woodstock, if I may.
Yes,
So
please.
we were looking for a new place to live. We had, at the time, we were living in Pennsylvania, and we went to all these different towns, New Paltz, Woodstock, and others, and spent the weekend. And we were in Woodstock in the center triangle, and there were people, because that's where all the demonstrations happened. There was a sign against fracking, and having been living in Pennsylvania and having been a home inspector there for 13 years, we knew what the dangers of fracking was. So we walked across the street to sign this petition, and a woman hands my wife the clipboard to sign a petition, and she looks at my wife and says, "Are you Beverly Brenner?" My wife said, "Not for 46 years." That's 12 more. So if it happened today, it would be not for 57 years. Anyway, that was a woman, a girl she went to high school with, who recognized her like it was yesterday. And she's a pretty well-known artist up here, and we have 3 of her pieces. So the world is small. It just,
Wow.
small.
Wow.
Anyway, tomorrow, since you and I live close to each other, we'll get together.
Oh, absolutely. Stephen, you'll have everybody's contact information. Good.
I will.
The Coops. I want to say maybe it sounds a little dopey, but I feel like we grew up in an intellectual universe.
Yes.
And things were important. Life was
Yes.
important. What you did was important. And I mean, to this day, people laugh at me. So many pop singers and rock songs. I don't know anything about. I'm totally blank on certain kinds of popular knowledge. And it's like life was important. It wasn't cute. It wasn't about, dressing up or something. And I think everything I've done, that stayed with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you really grew up with a sense of purpose.
Yes.
In fact, I remember, I don't know, Ira, you probably remember too, when Pop Mandel, before he was taken to prison, he was one of the theoreticians of the Communist Party.
Mhm.
And Ira and me and 2 other boys were given the honor to clean his library. My mother didn't want me to be exposed to so much dust because we lived right next door to him. But so she didn't like it, but they took us and they gave us, we were 12, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Remember, they gave us lessons on Hume and Descartes and Kant, like philosophers, that sort of we should understand, like the body politic that was behind the whole thinking. So even from a very young age, you weren't just a product of your family, you were clearly a product of the village.
Yeah.
And it was very empowering, for poor kids who otherwise could have thought nothing of themselves, like kids from the ghetto now. We grew up, we were empowered.
To make the
Wow.
world a better place, to leave it better than we found it. So simple.
Hopefully.
Just as an aside, before JoEllen, if you want to answer the question, with Pop Mandel, did they have any children? I don't think they had children, right?
Don't know.
Remember Tina?
Tina.
Wasn't
Moreau.
Tina connected to
Tina
Pop?
Moreau, but she was not a child of Mandel. No, I don't think
Okay.
they didn't have children.
Okay.
I think you're right. They didn't have children.
Because I definitely like, he's someone that comes up on a fairly regular basis, and I'd like to be able to find out more about his life and all. But
He was a dentist, I could tell you that.
He was a
Profession was
dentist?
a dentist. I'm not sure he practiced, but he was a dentist.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. So yeah, I'm gonna keep digging and see what I can find out about him. I mean, you know, even
Oh,
what happened to his library, I wonder. Probably it was thrown out, like often happens if people don't have children. But yeah.
does anyone remember Chava Gelman from Schiller?
I remember him. I wished I had him.
Chava Gelman's daughter has a house in Kingston, in Woodstock.
Huh.
Ira.
Yeah, but she's not
Aviva
there
Gelman?
anymore.
Does
Isn't
that
she?
mean
Is
I'll
it
tell you.
Hannah? Hannah, you're talking about?
Hannah Yachner's passed away.
Right.
Right.
Hmm.
Anyway,
see.
forget it.
JoEllen, what about you? I know we've talked about this before, but you know, in the presence of everyone else.
Well, you know, it was just such a lovely place to be. You didn't question it. I just remember sitting and drawing. I was pretty quiet, so I didn't run around a whole lot, you know, as a small child. But just it was such an imaginative place to play. The whole architecture of it, it's still amazing to me. It's just so beautiful. But like I say, I think everybody that came out of our kind of family situation felt that they had to leave the world a better place. You know, you weren't here to exploit it. It was supposedly to make it better. And there was hope that we could.
Yeah. Well, so want to turn it over more to you all now, and if you all have questions you want to ask each other, or any other question, anything else you want to talk about for today. I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours here, so also want to be respectful of your time. But anything else you want to ask each other, anything else you want to talk about for now?
Well, I can just tell you that there's nothing that I could ask Ira, or maybe vice versa, because he already knows everything I've thought in the last 75 years. You know, I was going to mention that. I mean, this just shows you about how close these bonds could be. I think we went through every rite of passage in our lives in the same place in the same day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Alan and I and our girlfriends ran away to Washington, D.C. together. You remember that?
I was going to save everybody the details, Ira.
Well, I didn't give any details. I just said we ran away together.
How old were you?
Oh, we were
17 because he drove a car, maybe 18. Right?
So was it Mickey?
Yeah.
It's Mickey Zito.
Oh, my bestie. See, when you said,
how did you know? How did you know Mickey?
Mickey was my best friend. Mickey still, nobody has ever replaced Mickey to me.
Oh,
but she died, right?
Oh, she sure did. She died on a bicycle when another bicycle hit her.
Wow.
I was supposed to meet her for lunch when that happened.
Yeah, I have beautiful pictures of her you might like, Alan.
Me too.
Yeah? Oh, I'd love to see them. We have to share them.
She was my first girlfriend.
You know, she had a big thing for you. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. You know, I remember I used to go to the park with her. I remember
her mother used to call my mother.
Oh, her mother was a Meshuggah. Oh,
but
God.
she says, "Where's Mickey?" Because he's always in my bedroom, you know.
Yeah, are they being intimate? Her mother was something else.
Oh boy.
I give that up. Yeah.
You talk about they being intimate. When Carol Caprino, quote, was my girlfriend.
Oh.
My mother, when I was 12 or 13, my mother said, "Are you going to marry Carol?" And in this mixed group that I don't know everybody here. I said, "Ma, I'm not going to marry her. I'm just trying to grab her boobies. That's all I'm do." Whatever small size they were.
I have a question for you, Stephen.
Yeah, sure.
we, haven't seen each other basically for decades. What's your take on how we connected today? Or,
Interact.
it's got to be a good 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your sense of us?
Yeah, well, it's something that I see time and time again with Coops people, even people who might not have known each other very well, but there's so much shared experience there. And, I mean, it was a very unique community, very unique set of experiences. So, it's natural that ends up forming really close bonds. I mean, and the fact, that you have a whole multiple generations of children growing up together, going to all of the same schools, going to, playing in the same areas, all of that. You add that with the kind of shared intellectual and political culture, then, yeah, it's really a beautiful thing to see it happen. I mean, when we had an exhibit on the Coops here at our museum last year from like August to I think May, but the opening, there was a good number of Coops people who came for it, and yeah, it was like a family reunion. And I feel like that's generally what ends up happening when Coops people, Coopniks are brought together, is that kind of feel like a family reunion. You might not like everyone in your family, but you still have
Yeah, right.
kind of family reunion. But generally Coopniks like each other and all. Or if they don't, they get over their grudges from however many years ago. But yeah.
I was just going to mention that I'm still, in case you need contacts, I'm still friendly with both Trudy Yalek and Mark Yalek.
Okay. Yes.
That's
I'd
Dr.
like to be put in
Yalek's
touch
school.
with anyone
Nice.
really, from the Coops. So anyone you can think of, because since it is such a unique history. I mean, it's like, I don't know, even when it comes to things like race, 1968 Parkchester, it was, Parkchester was an all whites development until 1968. I mean, even right down the road, very, very different experience. So when it comes to something like that, I mean, not to mention everything else having to do with the Coops, but so definitely interested in documenting the memories while we still can.
Yeah.
That's right.
And Trudy used to tell me stories. I remember when I stayed with Tamar, so I lived in the court at that time, she would tell me stories about Holocaust.
Really?
Yeah, and we must have been 5.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
she was born at DP camp.
We were
Oh my
really
God.
young, and this is like, actually, I didn't even know what she was speaking about, but
Yeah.
I just remember her saying, I think that there was a child that was killed on her mother's. I mean, it's just like something that I'm not even sure I remember this correctly. But I just remember sitting inside the court there with her on her steps and talking.
Wow.
Such a strange memory.
Make a quick observation, and I'm going to go. The 3 men here are wearing glasses, and the 2 women aren't.
I could put my glasses on.
Okay.
There you go. I could wear glasses. I can see you
maybe,
better though. Here we
the
go.
women had better genes. There you go.
Oh, hell no.
I use them for reading.
Right. Cataract surgery. You know about that,
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, it gave me back my sight. I couldn't even look at my paintings. The right eye saw nothing.
Well, JoEllen, maybe next time we get together, you'll have to do a tour of all of your paintings. JoEllen has
That's
hundreds of
right.
paintings
It's
in
great
her
stuff.
apartment.
That's right.
Well, actually, Stephen tried to take them as he walked around the apartment, but I kept talking to him and interrupting him since I have such a Eisenman mouth. Yeah. We all know what that means, right?
Well, to be
It was a blast
continued.
seeing you guys.
Oh, it's
Blast-
great. It's
Blast
wonderful.
talking with all of you, and hope you have a good rest of your
And
day.
we'll all connect through Stephen. He has all our
We will,
information.
Yeah,
definitely.
and now is the time to connect. Now is a very
There's not much
important
time left. So.
That's right.
That's
It's a very important time.
Mm.
I
Somebody
Yeah.
mentioned to me yesterday it was the fourth quarter.
Fourth
I didn't want to
quarter.
hear about it. But in case anybody is in Boston, then certainly look us up.
So what I keep telling Alan
Perfect.
is his mother only lived to 107 or something
Your
like that.
mother, Alan?
108.
Seriously.
Wow.
Your mother?
She just died a few years
Whoa.
ago.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
She died exactly 8 years ago.
Wow.
When I was
Wow.
in Australia.
My mother made it to 95, but not 108. Well, that's hopeful.
108.
Lily, as crazy as she always was really pretty good until she was 104. From 104 on, she was tough. So
Wasn't she always tough?
yeah. Anyway,
All
I'm gonna
right.
She
stand
sat
by
there and
you
talked to
guys.
Mickey's mother. She was tough. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
You all
Bye-bye.
take care.
Everybody.
You well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Love you.
Right.
Love you.